What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Breaking Bet. Listen, some of those people watching on my Twitter account, you'll notice that I'm back on Twitter. It's been a little bit because I didn't have premium, and post college baseball, post the MLB draft pre-show, I wasn't able to do anything on Twitter, and now I am. Luckily, I got my guy Eric Pauly here. What's going on? Slime action.
What's going on? Let's get it. I'm excited. Sorry, I had some message pop up. Excited to talk some sports, Johnny, as always.
Yeah, for sure, bro. And you know what? Like, we've been doing a lot of MLB and NFL, and I think really in terms of the MLB, we kind of know where we're at on most things. The only thing that's really up for grabs right now somehow is the NL Rookie of the Year. But, we just talked that, and otherwise it's really all about the futures of teams. But I think today, with NFL being 10 days away, it's a good time to focus on the NFL awards market. We have a lot of time left in terms of the amount of shows we're going to have between now and the kickoff next Thursday between the Ravens and the Chiefs in Kansas City, that we're going to be able to talk about some of team futures, divisions, all that stuff. On our last show, we covered yardages for passing, rushing, receiving. So now here, let's get into the awards here. And Eric, I'm going to let you start it off. Let's go on with the MVP, baby. Who you got winning it this year?
So if you guys tuned in last week, I know it's been a week now, so obviously welcome new viewers on Twitter. I'm a big Eagles guy this year. I'm a Washington Commanders fan, so I'm not like a Eagles homer, so I actually despise the Eagles. But I think the Eagles are one of, if not the best teams in the NFL from a roster, talent, organizational, coaching standpoint. I have them to be the best team in the NFL, and that would also coincide with Jalen Hurts, their quarterback, potentially winning an MVP award. So I have interest in Jalen Hurts to win the Most Valuable Player award. He's a guy, like, he's, again, like, of the bets I've taken for the Eagles, I've taken them to have the best record. Like, I love that bet. I took Saquon most rush yards. I absolutely love that bet as well. So I don't have coin on Hurts himself to win this award, but I do really like Jalen Hurts to potentially win the MVP. This Eagles schedule is one of the easier schedules in the NFL. Hurts, of course, has now, I'm not going to say a three-headed monster because Jahan Dotson really isn't good, but he obviously has now a better receiving room than it was 3 days ago. How better, TBD. But considering my love for them as a team in general, and he's the quarterback of what I expect to be the best team in the NFL, I'll start there, Johnny. So you let me know who you like, and I have some other like long shots I want to talk about. But if I, gun to head had to make a pick, it would be on the Eagles, Jalen Hurts to win the MVP award.
Yeah, no, listen, Jalen Hurts is a guy that I've had money on last year. I think I had money on him the year before as well. And for anybody that doesn't understand, the politics and the voting procedures regarding MVP, MVP is predominantly a quarterback award. You look at Chris McCaffrey last year, the season he had, when all the quarterbacks were terrible for the most part. Like, there was no truly great, outstanding quarterback play. Lamar Jackson won MVP and didn't even have 30 total touchdowns, despite McCaffrey having 2,200 scrimmage yards and over 20 total touchdowns. So it just goes to show how slanted it is towards the quarterback. And, it's bad. It's got to change. But predominantly how it works is the quarterback is the MVP, and it goes to the team that is usually the 1 or the 2 seed in the conference, which requires to win the division. Rarely does it go to a 3 seed. Very rarely does it go to a 4 seed, and it almost never goes to a wild card. So really you have to think about which of the 4 teams can come either 1 or 2 in each conference. Kansas City, obviously. You look at the AFC, chances are Lamar's not going to run it back. Joe Burrow, 10-1. Stroud has gained a lot of popularity. I personally think the Bills are not winning division. I think they're on their way down, on a decline. I felt their window was closing for a while. So really the AFC, it's very thin. And then you look over at the NFC, really it's pretty much just Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts. You get a couple people that think Purdy can win, and Prescott and Goff. Stafford would be a nice sprinkle. But for my money, I don't love this award right now. I want to see how it shakes out the first few weeks. But a guy that I do have my eyes on is Aaron Rodgers at 25-1. I think a lot of people have written him off because of his age and because of the injury, but he's got a great alpha receiver one in Garrett Wilson. He's got a big-time 50-50 playmaker, Big Mike Will. If he can stay healthy and play even 13 games, you have a stud running back in Breece Hall. You have a fantastic defense with the Jets. And I think if Rodgers can go back to his, signature Green Bay style of play the last couple of years before he left, which is like 4,000-ish yards, high 30s and tutties, low interceptions, there's no reason Rodgers can't be a contender if he stays healthy. I mean, you look at the early part of the schedule. He's got to go to San Francisco week 1, which right now, Trent Williams up in the air, Brandon Ayuk up in the air. I think that's a winnable game in San Fran. Then you have the Titans. That's a winnable game. The Patriots is winnable. The Broncos is winnable. Vikings is winnable. Bills is winnable. Steelers winnable. Like the toughest game he has to play outside of San Fran week 1 is home to the Texans on October 31st. I mean, really, if we're looking at it, it's not that difficult of a schedule for the Jets. So to think that the Jets, if everything goes their way, and we know how they're cursed, they can win 11 or 12 games, get the division, there's a really good chance that this team is going to be a top 2 seed, and the price is right on Aaron Rodgers, where you get all these guys jumbled up. So I think Rodgers right now is worth a stab. Personally, I just think Patrick Mahomes at plus 450, I hate it. It's so chalk, but the truth is Kansas City's probably going to be a top 2 seed. I think the AFC West is going to be bad this year. I think Kansas City is going to be able to probably win at least 13 games, bare minimum 12. So, for my money, I think Mahomes and Rodgers are the 2 guys that I would take. And, I think the problem is the Stroud pick and the Love pick. It's just a little bit too trendy for my taste. Like, as great of a season as they had last year, Eric, people don't realize the luck that's involved. Now there's expectations. There's a target on your back. Maybe a little bit of regression. Like, it's very hard to build off what you did last year and parlay into an MVP caliber season. So I feel like it's just a little bit overblown with those guys, and the odds, I'm not really feeling the love there. So I'd like to go Rodgers a little bit further down the board. And outside shot, what do you think about Caleb?
No. I think the Bears like they're like a Madden team, right? Like they have the 3 receivers, they have a cool running back, but they have a really weak offensive line. They have I'm not a fan of Luke Getsy as their offensive coordinator, and you can kind of convince me if you're going to tell me any rookie, it's Jaden Daniels. That's not even as a Washington Commander fan. That's just as somebody who can actually entirely take over the team with the rushing and passing ability. I can get convinced if anyone that. I think the Bears are going to be an 8-9, 9-8 team. So I'm not saying Washington's going to light the league on fire either, but I would more so look to the dynamic dual threat ability of Daniels in a MVP race than a Caleb Williams, who I think, yes, you have the better weapons, but I don't like Getsy's offensive style. And I think that their offensive line, though Washington's bad too, they're not guys that I'm really interested in. I think your Rodgers pick, though, is amazing because if you're in on the Jets, you might as well be all in on the Jets. And that includes Aaron Rodgers having a vintage season. Like, if you think the Jets are going to win, yes, they have these good pieces on defense. You're obviously also anticipating Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers and putting together like literally one last ride of the multiple time MVP that we've seen. So if you are anybody who is in on the Jets being good, you should definitely be intrigued by Aaron Rodgers to win the MVP. But no, when it comes to I think Joe Burrow is worth a look at 10-1, even though the number's not great. I would actually even look at Josh Allen just because if they do win that division, considering the lack of overall skill talent they have, it's only going to be because Josh Allen willed that team to win. But obviously Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback and player in the entire NFL, so you can never really discount him. But you've sold me honestly on A-Rod because I do just simply agree that if you're in on the Jets, you might as well do what they did, which is push all their chips in the middle. And if you like the Jets, you might as well take Rodgers to win as well as them to win the East, etc. You might as well, if you have a couple of extra bucks in your pocket, take Rodgers MVP as well.
OTC does point out Shane Waldron is now.
No, yes, Waldron. I'm not a fan of Waldron either. We saw what he did in Seattle last year. I did know there was a change. Thank you, OTC, for the quick rebuttal. I am out on Waldron as well. I misspoke, of course, but Waldron does not move any needles for me. I know I was out in the OC when doing my pre-research.
It's also noteworthy when betting the MVP, like somebody like myself. Like, for instance, baseball-wise, I did not love the Cy Young market either way preseason. I just did not like it. I thought there was going to be a lot of opportunities for long shots to come through. But, it's a long season. You want to see how it unfolds. The NFL is a little bit more abbreviated, but MVP-wise, I have a couple guys that I like right now, but I don't know if I'm going to actually make any bets just because early in the season, certain losses can have a ripple effect, especially when it comes to having a tight divisional game. For instance, if you're in on Lamar Jackson, say 15-1, they have the Chiefs week 1. If they lose to the Chiefs week 1, he's going to fall back. And honestly, he's got the Bengals early on. If he loses there, then it's hard to recover because knowing what you know about what it means to have a division leader and what the path is, that's why sometimes it's better off waiting. Like a guy like Matthew Stafford, for my money, 30-1, I'd probably want a little bit more on him because when you look at, the opportunity that they would have to beat San Francisco to have a chance. You look at the early part of the Rams schedule. You got the Lions, the Cardinals, the Niners, the Bears. Like that's a tough schedule, like right off the bat. And you've got like Dolphins, Eagles, Bills, Niners again, Jets later on in the season. So, when you're examining who you like for the MVP, keep that factored in as well as what the schedule is, because that also might tell you when the time to buy is and when the time to sit back and wait.
Yes, and that's an amazing point and something we talked about when it comes to MLB. It translates to every single sport. You don't need to bet preseason MVP to get good value in this market. You can literally wait a couple of weeks. If you like Mahomes and they go 0-3 somehow to start the season, then you bet Mahomes week 3. You shouldn't be betting him at this really chalky price plus 450 preseason. And for the best example of this, I'm sure there's millions of them out there. I talked about NFL last year. Preseason, the Chiefs were 6.5-1 to win the Super Bowl. The week going into the playoffs, the Chiefs were 10-1. Literally just to win the entire thing from already the playoffs, you're 10-1 on the Kansas City Chiefs. I was all over that and made some coin. Just an example that comes up at the top of my head because that's just the true facts of the matter. We've seen it with Paul Skeens Rookie of the Year. We've talked about it a million times, Jackson Merrill, etc. It's the same thing in any futures market. If you even love anybody on the board, like yes, if they start hot, you're maybe missing some value there as well. But again, on those guys that are at the top of the board, like if you love Josh Allen, you might as well honestly hope they lose the first 2 games and then bet Josh Allen at a better price 2 weeks into the season than betting him at a really, really chalky number that's not as great to start off the year.
Let me ask you, what about Anthony Richardson? He's in the 35-1 category. I think the Colts and the Cardinals, Richardson and Kyler Murray, Rugrat, I think there's a lot of high variance there. The floor can be bad, but if everything goes their way health-wise, and, Richardson especially, who's coming into his second year, and he only played like 4 games last year, and start realizing their potential, and they make waves, and they're a team that wins 11, 12 games. Maybe they're only a 3 seed, and they surprise everybody when they're not expected because the Texans are so much better and they win the division. And, even though they're a 3 seed, Anthony Richardson has like 1,200 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. And he has 3,500 pass yards and 24 passing touchdowns. Like any feel for that with the Colts or maybe the Cardinals? I think the Cardinals, it's a little bit more difficult because they have to climb up a steeper hill, but Colts more specifically with Anthony Richardson with an MVP bid.
Anthony Richardson, you could sell me on. I would put coin on. I think there is value in long shot. I think Shane Steichen last year proved that he is a plus offensive coordinator. I think Anthony Richardson in his limited game time showed that he is an absolute threat if he could stay healthy. Like you said, I don't see the path. The path is much more clear for Richardson than Murray, and I think the odds obviously are reflecting that. And I think that the odds are correct to have Richardson as a lower, or I have Murray have higher odds than Richardson, because I don't personally see it with Kyler Murray. I think that he's not as good of a quarterback as he's getting this love for. I think he's really closer to the middle of the pack than he is really top 10. But with Anthony Richardson, considering the fact that last year, 122 dropbacks before he got hurt, and you saw all these amazing traits, and that second year leap is something to always consider. And you saw that with Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and some of their MVP seasons. So Anthony Richardson, you don't have to sell me on. I'm sold. I think that is a worthy sprinkle.
So the problem with the Colts here, they start off with the Texans, then they get the Packers, then they get the Bears. 3 really tough games off the rip. Steelers, no slouch. Defense is still there. Jags, divisional game. They're a tough team. Same with the Titans. Then they get the Dolphins. Then they get the Texans again. They got the Bills, Jets, Lions in a 3-game stretch in November. And it softens up a bit. They get the Pats, Broncos, Titans again, but then the Giants and Jags. So, there's a lot of hard games on the schedule where if you won an MVP, they won the division, you got to earn it. This is a very difficult schedule. And we're just real quick to touch on Mahomes before we move on here. The Chiefs start out at home against the Ravens and Bengals. Mm-hmm. There is a world where they lose both of those games. Cincinnati is the only team in the AFC that can consistently run with KC with Burrow under center. So that is a game that they very well can lose. I'd imagine Chiefs are a 3-point favorite at home, maybe 3.5, depending on where the line's opening. If the Ravens are a 3-point underdog, I would imagine Cincinnati's about on that same plane. So if you lose those 2 games, you might get some value because then they bounce back. They're at Atlanta on Sunday night. Then they're Chargers, Saints, Niners, Raiders, Bucks, Broncos, Bills, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers. Then you finish up with Cleveland, Texans, Pittsburgh, Denver. But still, I think that's probably a good opportunity to buy.
And also just with the Chiefs, I mean, like overall, like that schedule really isn't daunting, and but like you said, the beginning of the schedule is a little bit difficult. They could easily be 0-2, so you're better off. Like if you miss the boat on 4.5 to 1 on Mahomes preseason, and he never gets back to that point, he runs away with the award. Like I don't think you botch. Like that just is what it is. It's like normally there's so many things happen, so many factors happen throughout the course of the season, and these odds are shifting literally week to week. And we've seen times like Brock Purdy with literally 3 weeks to go last year look like a clear-cut favorite, and then that display against the Ravens absolutely changed the entire dynamic of everything. So unless you're taking a long shot guy that you think is sneaky value, like a Aaron Rodgers and Anthony Richardson, even if you want to convince yourself, or on a Kyler Murray or a guy like Jalen Hurts, we think is going to start off hot and never look back. Sure, but you don't need to be taking a guy like Mahomes now. You could probably get a better number. And if you can't, all right, you didn't bet the MVP award this season, it's okay. There'll be more NFL seasons to bet on.
Absolutely. Let's move on here to the offensive player of the year. Always one of my favorite markets. I usually do very well at this. I hit Jefferson in 2022 for a nice little payday. Last year, I think I had a little bit of McCaffrey money. That was I was a little bit more disappointed because I had more on him as an MVP, but nevertheless, it's Hill pacing everybody, then McCaffrey, Lamb, Chase, JJ, Bijan, Amon-Ra, AJ, Breece Hall, Nakua. Like, where do you see value? Like, do you think Tyreek Hill is the guy who's got to be the favorite? And do you concur that you should be betting him into oblivion, or because of the depth of this award where it can literally be a quarterback, receiver, running back, tight end. Typically, we gravitate more towards the running back receivers because nowadays those are the most likely candidates because MVPs are usually reserved for the QB position.
Yeah. It's essentially if there is a person who has a season that's just not as good as the MVP, you can have a quarterback win this award. So it does make it difficult. Tyreek Hill being chalk at 8-1, I think makes a ton of sense. But going down that board, somebody who I would look at if you're looking for a real big flyer for this kind of market, especially because there's so much variance involved. There's so many injuries that can happen. And I would look at Devon Achane at 60-1. I mean, obviously the Mostert's still in there, or it's a 60-1 bet. So of course, it's not something that you would expect to win. But considering what he does when he's on the field and the fact that he has the opportunity to continue to explode, like you could argue that wasn't even like his ceiling outreach last season based on some injuries and the number of snaps he played and how they kind of held him in check. Like, yeah, you could say it's a fluke that he only touched the ball, X amount of times and that he cannot replicate that same yards per carry type of success. But if he can, this is a guy who literally torched the league last year. So 60-1 for a guy that is literally dynamite, it's a sprinkle.
I'm going to tell you right now, I love Tyreek Hill. I like Tyreek Hill coming into the year. And I think the fact is, when you're putting up the amount of yards, catches, and tutties this guy is year in, year out, and he didn't even play 17 full games, like he easily could have won the award last year. I think 8-1 is a good number. This for me would be a 2-unit play, just because I believe in Tyreek Hill so much. And really, in Mike McDaniel's offense, it is so emphasized about timing. I feel like they're one of the few offenses that is in their own stratosphere of timing. And that's why Tua has been able to succeed. And that's why Tyreek Hill has been able to turn it up since he left Kansas City, even when leaving Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So I feel like as long as Hill stays healthy, there's nobody that can guard him. He's just too fast. And then you factor in Tyreek Hill's ability to create separation, get open, know where the holes are. McDaniel's offense, the timing with Tua. So I think Hill, obviously, even though he's chalk, I think it's a great pick. And like let's go down the list here. McCaffrey won last year. Nobody's won back-to-back years since Marshall Faulk from 99 to 2001. Lamb, he just got paid. I think he's going to regress. I think there is an elevated injury risk. He's only coming back 10 days before the season starts, or less than 2 weeks before the season starts. Jamar Chase, kind of in the same realm. He is practicing a little bit, but 12-1. I think Chase is a guy that I'd put a pin in to see how he starts. Jefferson, not with Darnold. Robinson, I like, but I just don't think he's going to get the amount of carries. People are like forgetting about Tyler Algier. Amon-Ra is interesting at 16-1. I don't think he gets enough volume on a week-to-week basis. His overall numbers look good. A.J. Brown, no. Breece Hall, maybe. Nakua, no. Garrett Wilson's interesting. I think if we're looking at a guy down the board, I think Kyren Williams at 60-1. That's a guy I have picked to lead the league in rushing yards. I think Kyron's going to be a workhorse this year. I don't think Blake Corum's going to interfere enough to eat away from the overall volume, Eric. And I think Williams is a guy that can reasonably have 1,600-plus rushing yards, 15-plus touchdowns, add a little bit in the receiving game. If he has that, he's certainly going to be in the conversation to be the offensive player of the year. And you want the Hail Mary pick? The Hail Mary pick is Marvin Harrison Jr. at 150-1. We don't know what this guy can do at the NFL level, but Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison is drawing so much hype, so much excitement. And listen, there is a realm, a path where it completely disappoints. Somebody gets hurt, they're not on the same page. Kyler Murray complains like an infant. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been reportedly not happy with coming into Arizona. There's a world. But if everything clicks, 150-1, bro, Marvin Harrison could be a 115 catch, 15 to 1,600 yard, 12 touchdown guy this year. He could be. That's a world. So 150-1 is worth the sprinkle. A guy like DJ Moore, I was appealed at 75-1. I'd probably wait to see how the connection with Caleb Williams goes before I fire. But I think Tyreek Hill is definitely my number one, and Marvin Harrison is the absolute long shot Hail Mary.
Yeah, and I see that because like you said, there's a clear path for Marv to have like a 27 to 30% like target share this upcoming season. Like we're just absolutely getting force fed. And some guys I think that are more more realistic. I know I went with a 61 long shot. Like you, I know you're on Kyron, most rushing yards. I'm on Saquon, and we also discussed how that could lead to more pass catching opportunities for Saquon, being that he is more of a weapon type running back. So in this market, when he was at 30-1, I would look at potentially Saquon. And again, like I'm not an Eagles fan, I promise. I just like the Eagles' outlook very much so this year. And I also do agree with you on DJ Moore, simply because of just how talented he is. Like DJ Moore is an animal. So if that's kind of where they decide to force feed, even though they do have mouths to feed, which I also partly why I think Waldron and the Bears overall are going to struggle, because I think having too many players that you need to feed, especially for a rookie quarterback and as the OC, makes your life more difficult rather than having a situation where you have the less talented pieces where you just have to make do and everyone's kind of bought in. Like, is Keenan Allen going to be complaining if he's not getting the ball or 10 targets a game? I don't know. It could be. Like, is De'Ami Brown going to complain in Washington if he's not getting the ball 10 times a game? No, he's not going to say a word. So I just don't know if there's enough for like Chicago to be good, but talent-wise, pure talent-wise, I do agree with you with DJ Moore. And with Marv, like we said, he could get unprecedented, like Puka Nacua-esque target share rates. And he was obviously a top 4 pick. So I can see Marvin Harrison as an absolute Hail Mary. I love where your head's at there.
Speaking of the Bears, speaking of Marvin Harrison, speaking of Jaden Daniels, let's go to Offensive Rookie of the Year. So I'd like to point out before we get started, last year Puka Nacua set the record for rookies in catches and yards, and he did not win. Why? Because C.J. Stroud, he led his team to the playoffs, even though he missed a handful of games. His stats were nice, but they didn't jump off the screen. Maybe 20 tutties to 5 picks, something like that. Very good, but Puka Nacua, the season he put up and he didn't win. And yeah, I'm a little upset because I had a little action on that, by the way. But I think after that, it's really hard to consider a receiver to win the award. I think Marv at 650 is interesting. Caleb 120. I don't love that. I think it's way too short. It's too much respect. Honestly, my bet would probably be Jaden Daniels at 6-1. I think Washington is in a division that is up for grabs. I think the NFC East, with Dallas and Philly is good, but I don't think they're great. And they don't even have to win the division. They just have, if they can easily make the playoffs. Dan Quinn's in there. Dan Quinn has had success in the past getting teams to the playoffs, to the Super Bowl as a head coach. Jaden Daniels is another high variance guy where the rushing combined with the passing can really lead to a very successful rookie year, Eric. And as a fantasy player, I think Jaden Daniels is a guy I'm circling. It's a pretty talented roster when you consider some of the pieces they have. So I think Jaden Daniels at 6-1 is probably the best bang for your buck.
I 100% agree. I'm all over Jaden Daniels, and you can call me unbiased if you want for being a Washington fan, but no, I mean, it's the skill set, it's the rushing and passing ability. The fact that the offensive line for Washington isn't great, I think also can help this, because if he's running for his life, it's not going to be like a running for your life and you're in a situation where you're running for your life and you're incapable, like a Zach Wilson running for his life, like he was with that Jets offensive line. He's just throwing the ball all over the place. Jaden Daniels running for his life. He's going to run forward and he's going to run for yardage and he's going to pick up yards that way. Of course, hopefully it doesn't lead to him taking big shots and getting injured. But like you said, Johnny, like the wide receiver versus quarterback dilemma now after what happened with Puka and Stroud last year, Marv can put up Puka-esque numbers, which are even incredible. So that would be a success and a half, and still lose to a Jaden Daniels who, like you said, I have the Eagles firmly as the number 1 seed in the NFC East, but you could tell me the Dallas Cowboys, like I don't have the Cowboys in the playoffs. I have the Dallas Cowboys listed in the playoffs this year. I don't have Washington in, but if you told me Washington made it and Dallas didn't, and we fast forward to the end of the season, that's what happened, I would not bat an eye. And of course, all of that would be accredited to Jaden Daniels putting on for the boys. So I think it's Jaden Daniels or bust in this situation. I'm out on Caleb. Not saying I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be a good NFL quarterback, like long term. Again, I just have my issues with the Bears team that's so hyped now. Oh, best situation ever for number 1 pick, like kind of due to bust. And a player we should definitely just talk about because is Bo Nix. And while I do think that the Denver Broncos are being disrespected in the market as their win total is only 5.5, and they have one of the better coaches in all of football, it's going to help Bo Nix not lose games. I think that just because that's going to be their style where he's just managing the game simply, which isn't a knock on him. That's a good thing to do. You manage a quarterback who has limitations. You do that properly, you can actually win football games. But I don't think he's going to be able to have like game-breaking numbers a la Jaden Daniels to win this award, even if the Broncos end up winning, 6-7 games and, go over that win total of 5.5. I still don't think that'll ever be enough from Bo Nix to win this award. So I think that that's a guy I would stay away from. Obviously, he's a starter, but again, it's probably going to take a couple of weeks for him to really get in rhythm. I know he played a lot in preseason, but still, I wouldn't touch Bo Nix, another guy that maybe I'd wait and see on if you want to get in later, but pre-flop, I would not be in on Bo Nix.
Yeah, absolutely not. I think Nix is talented. With Sean Payton, he could be something, but again, that is something worth, waiting on. A guy that I'm interested in, and it's only going to get longer as the season goes on. It's probably not going to happen, but Michael Penix 75-1. Say, Kirk Cousins, maybe he's not right. Maybe he gets hurt and re-injures himself. I mean, he's 36. He's no spring chicken in the NFL world. I think Michael Penix in some world could, end up being a starter. I think he could get a lot of time. The problem becomes now, like, if he's got to go compete with like a Daniels or a Caleb Williams who's starting like 15, 16 games. Yeah. Listen, I don't think Penix is going to win. I'm just, thinking out loud here. But ultimately, I feel like right now, Jaden Daniels is probably the direction I would go. And I think Marvin Harrison's interesting, right? Because say Caleb Williams underwhelms this season. Say Jaden Daniels underwhelms and Marv puts up a big season. There is a world where that happens because you got to look at where the situation that these two quarterbacks are going. They're potentially playoff teams, but they're also teams that could still be another year away. So I personally don't think there's any value on Caleb Williams at plus 120. We're anointing him the king when – and you know what? The truth is he had a couple really nice throws in the preseason game a couple weeks ago. But overall, he had a 50% completion rate. Well, the thing is, awards aren't won because you made a couple nice highlight plays. It's not how it works. And I'm not saying Caleb Williams won't be good. I'm saying he's not going to have a great year. He'll win the Rookie of the Year. None of that. I'm just saying there's a possibility where it doesn't happen. And I think a Jaden Daniels is worth it. And then Marvin Harrison is a guy that off the rip I would keep my eye on.
I 100% agree. Jaden, Marv are my two. Keep it. Again, I was making a case to wait in other markets. This is a market with those two players where I would try to get an ASAP. And a Knicks, I would wait on. Certain players, you have to. It's timing the market in itself is a skill, and those are players that I would look at immediately. And if you want a Knicks, I would personally wait on a guy like Knicks right now.
Yeah, it's a lot about the schedule. I mean, you look at their schedule. They're at Tampa. That's a coin flip game. I think Tampa probably wins, but that is a game where Washington can definitely go down and win. Although they're going to be dealing with the humidity in September. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's nice, but it could definitely get hot. The Giants, that could be a win. The Bengals, they'll probably lose. At the Cardinals, toss-up. Browns, they'll probably lose. Ravens, they'll lose. Panthers, they can win. Bears, they can win. Giants, again, they can win. Steelers is winnable.
We'll say with this, but I see where you're coming from too. But in an award like this, right? If Jaden Daniels puts up, say, 4,500 total scrimmage yards, and the Commanders still go 6-11, he still could win the award.
Yeah. I'm just saying, a rookie QB leading a team to the playoffs is usually the easiest way to go. So, is there a path for them to get to the playoffs? So, the playoffs carries more weight in the NFL than, say, the MLB. Cy Young winners can, Blake Snell, don't have to make the playoffs to win the award. Okay, so we did offense. Let's go down to Defensive Player of the Year. We got Parsons leading the charge, and Garrett, Watt, Crosby, Bosa, Hutchinson, Chris Jones, Kyle Hamilton, Daniil Hunter, Josh Allen, Will Anderson, Trey Hendrickson, Montez Sweat, Rashawn Gary, et cetera, et cetera. What are you thinking for the Defensive Player of the Year?
So I cashed on Miles last year. That was
bullshit, by the way. Myles Garrett did not deserve the Defensive Player of the Year. That was ridiculous. It was a TJ Watt story last year.
I can't say I disagree or I don't. It doesn't. All I know is that ticket cash for me, and that was a preseason bet I made. So it's obviously fun sweating that. I obviously do see why that could have not hit, but I'll take that with the Myles Garrett win. Some things to consider. The people who are winning this award, right? I know we love to look down the board in certain awards and something for a Coach of the Year, defensive, or excuse me, Offensive Player of the Year. You can maybe go down the board and find some value, or even an MVP. Some of these years you can really find someone really down the board. But when it comes to these Defensive Player of the Year awards and Defensive Rookie of the Year awards, the pedigree of these winners you're talking the best players. You're talking first round picks. You're talking big name players are the guys who are generally winning this award. And by generally, I mean more than 80% of the time, you're better off looking at the top of this board for players to come in. Rarely do guys like Gilmore a couple years ago when he won. Like there are obviously outliers, always outliers, but you're better off really looking at the top of this board. So TJ Watt, of course, is on my mind. But another thing I wanted to mention, you kind of really got to look in like the edge rusher kind of tier. Like, yes, you had a couple of, well, right now 9 straight and 14 of the last 15 winners came from teams who made the playoffs. And Stephon Gilmore is the only non-edge rusher, including Aaron Donald, who still on the defensive line, to win the award in the last 10 years. So you have to look for guys who are on good teams and are on the defensive line. That's why TJ Watt might be a little bit scary. I'm out on Parsons at the price. I want Max Crosby badly, but the fact that the Raiders are going to stink again, I don't know if that's debatable, but I think the Raiders are going to stink again. Makes you kind of want to shy away there. I'm not really sold on Aiden Hutchinson. I kind of like Will Anderson Jr. because the price is a little long, and he did do some flashes. The Texans should be good this year. Not a market I'm dying to bet, Johnny. What are you thinking?
Yeah, here's the thing with Parsons, right? Like, I bet him last year because I thought they were going to be dying to give him the award after the year before when Nick Bosa won it. The problem is with Parsons, it's hard to quantify him because he does a lot of things, a lot of valuable things for the Dallas defense that doesn't get put in the stat book. Like, he might only be a 10 or 11 sack a year guy, but he's doing a lot of great things in coverage, off the ball, play the run well. And I think the voters are aware of that at this point, but you don't have those 20 sack seasons from Micah Parsons. And I felt like, the voters are just dying to give him the award because it's kind of overdue. Yeah. But at the respect of the price of 520, I don't agree with it. Dallas just lost Deron Bland for like 6 to 8 weeks. You got Trayvon Diggs coming back off a torn ACL, Achilles, or I think it's an ACL. So the Dallas defense might not be that good, especially in their secondary. And I think that could really hurt them. And I am of the belief that with you that Dallas might miss the playoffs this year. Luckily for them, the NFC is relatively weak. Myles Garrett, he got extremely lucky. No way. He should not be getting it. He should not have gotten it last year. I don't think he'll get it this year. He's got to be pushing 20 sacks to have a real case. TJ Watt, even though Pittsburgh, I would think is on the outside looking in with the playoffs, anytime you could be pushing 20 sacks or more, it doesn't always matter if you make the playoffs. So TJ Watt at plus 750 is a guy that I would be looking at. Or, you can go kind of get off the playoff risk and you can go look for him to have the most sacks, which is in that price. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's somewhere in like the 6-1 territory. I'd have to go double check that for you. Crosby, same kind of thing. Nick Bosa at 10-1 is a guy that I really like. Nick Bosa won it 2 years ago. He had a down year by his standards, had like 10.5 sacks, 11 sacks. This is a guy that on one of the best teams in football, maybe the best team in the conference. I still expect San Francisco to be a 12-win team. A team that wins the division, a team that's a 1 or 2 seed in the playoffs this year. If Nick Bosa, like 2 years ago, is the guy that has 18 sacks, he's got tackles for loss, he has a couple of those swing games where he has 3 sacks, that's a guy at 10-1 I think is worth taking a look at. Hutchinson, I agree with you. Chris Jones, I love, but I don't think he gets enough respect as an interior lineman. Kyle Hamilton's a safety. Danielle Hunter, I had a ticket on last year at 100-1 when he was pushing for the sack lead, and he just didn't even get a thought. And when you looked at his numbers and sacks and tackles for loss and pressures, it was all up there, and he wasn't even considered, and it was ridiculous. Josh Allen, no. Will Anderson, I am of the belief that he's a cool little sleeper. But Henderson, Sweat, Gary, I'm not really digging any of those guys. If I'm going to go with a guy outside the front 7, and by the way, since 1999, only 3 defensive backs have won the award. Or no, I'm sorry, that might have been Rookie of the Year. Never mind. But predominantly it is a front 7 award. Or no. Yeah, no, it was Defensive Player of the Year. It's a predominantly front 7 award, though. But if we're going to look in the cornerback position, I think Sauce Gardner at 60-1 makes sense. Sauce Gardner is probably the best corner in football. The Jets are going to have an opportunity with the defense they have to shut down a lot of teams. So if Sauce Gardner gets maybe 5 or 6 interceptions, and he's on the best defense in the NFL, and he's the top player on that defense. Obviously, the problem is when you get to the level of a Sauce Gardner, a lot of teams don't throw his way, so he's not going to get the numbers. But still at 60-1, I think it's worth the stab. But for my money, I think TJ Watt and Nick Bosa are probably the ways to go in this award.
Yeah, I agree with you on Bosa. Honestly, on Sauce, like you're talking 60-1, so I'm never going to be like, no, it's 60-1. How dare you? Like, I don't see it, but I could see why you would see it. And again, the Crosby, like on a pure talent basis, would be my one. But considering the profile of the awards, of the award winners coming from teams that win football games and are actually good overall defenses, that's not the case for Max Crosby. He has all the talent in the world. And part of why I bet Myles Garrett preseason last year was because of the Jim Schwartz edition in Cleveland and because of the Zadarius Smith signing. They also had a couple nose tackles up front. And I was like, this is by far the best defensive line Myles Garrett has, and he's going to have some support and help. That ended up being true, whether or not he should have won. Semantics at this point. But with Crosby, it's that same situation where he is now having the best support he's ever had around him. But considering how good the Browns' overall defense was last year, which propelled Garrett to winning that award, and based on the past criteria of these voters, who are the same voters making the same votes on the same decision-making processes, I can't pound the table for Crosby just because the Raiders are not going to be a good football team. And that is proven to be impactful in this award, unless Crosby has an absolutely ridiculous season, which, considering his talent, I guess I can't rule that out.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's another award where, because sacks are hard to come by, 1 week can turn this whole thing. Like you looked at last year, for instance, Deron Bland, pick 6. Like he was never going to win. But he comes there, his price gets cut in half from 100-1 to 50-1, and he ends up at 15-1, 20-1 by the end of the season. This guy was never going to win. It's just because the pick 6s, and it was a cool story. But there's certain guys that have the profile to win, but they're just not, because this award is even more exclusive, I think, than an MVP. There's a very strict criteria to win. But I think when typically you want those elite pass rushers, those guys that can get you 20 plus sacks or at least 17 or 18. You get the tackles for loss, you get the pressures, because really there's only one way to quantify their value in the box score, and it's sacks or interceptions, or that's really it. Like tackles for losses is a nice add-on, but really interceptions and sacks are like the blockbuster stat. It's like home runs. It's like a lot of these rookie of the years win if they have home runs, just because home runs are the flashy stat. Last main award here, we have Defensive Rookie of the Year. I'm not as high on this one. I think it's always just too early. I think this is another pedigree one. I think you have to look more about situation, scheme, fit, who their coach is. I think that helps a little bit more. And you saw last year with the insane shift, right? You had who was it? Jalen Carter from the Eagles was a monster favorite, and then all of a sudden, action started coming in on Will Anderson and Kobe Turner. I don't know if it's because somebody tweeted out and pointed it out or something, because I thought I remember that, but.
When it comes to last year, what I think it really was is Jalen Carter started sucking down the stretch. He started off hot and then just was bad, and Will Anderson started off slow and then became good. So I don't think it was really I know we talk a lot about market manipulation, et cetera, what should happen, what shouldn't. I think with last year, it really just was a simple case of one guy coming out of the gate really hot and fading, another guy coming out of the gate, as a rookie, as you expect rookies to, and really turning into a really good player toward the end of his rookie season.
I think for me here, I would start with Dallas Turner at plus 440 on the Minnesota Vikings. Alabama, these Alabama front seven guys are always legit. It's a guy that can get after the pass rusher. I think now a thing to consider here when it comes to statistical boost is Minnesota could be trailing a lot this year, and they could be playing catch up. So that is one thing that might end up hurting him on the defensive side of the ball, because if they're playing from behind and the other team is just going to start running. So I think a plus 440, I'd probably be looking elsewhere. Maybe Mike Sainristil from Washington, your Commanders, out of Michigan, cornerback. Dan Quinn's defense. I think Dan Quinn can run a pretty good defense here in Washington, although I am skeptical only because when he was Atlanta's head coach, he didn't run a great defense. But when he focused solely on defenses in Dallas and Seattle, it was much better. But I think right now, really, I'd be looking a little bit more towards the Mike Sainristil line, maybe the Chop Robinson down in Miami.
So I have a bet on this award, and I have some criteria to look at. So for starters, going back to 2000, 3 winners were defensive backs, and the rest of the players were either defensive linemen or linebackers. And 7 of the last 10 winners were defensive linemen. So keep in mind that. Also, 29 straight Defensive Rookie of the Year winners have come from a player drafted inside the top 40, and 26 of the last 29 winners have been a first-round pick. So this is a situation where you are looking for pedigree in this market in terms of draft capital and guys who you're not really digging for the diamond in the rough here. You kind of are looking for the top of the board. Now, with that being said, this year is a little unique because Latu was the first defensive player picked, and he wasn't picked until 15 or 16. So, like, normally you're better off with a safe bet on Myles Garrett or T.J. Watt or Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, a guy who was drafted at the top of the board in that class, Micah Parsons, etc. So, considering that pedigree factor of a first-round pick is still very pertinent and defensive line is still huge, I have money on Byron Murphy of Seattle, defensive lineman, to win the award. I think Mike McDonald is one of the best head coaching signings any team has made this offseason. I think it's very evidented by what Baltimore did last season and how their defense, which was made up of some of the less known names you would expect for a Baltimore Ravens defense. Like, it was expected to not be as great of a unit just from a name situation. He had guys like Justin Matabuki playing his best football. He had their cornerbacks playing these amazing styles of football. And considering 1, his draft capital, 2, his skill set, and 3, now the scheme he is in, I think Byron Murphy, defensive tackle, Seattle Seahawks. I have my money on it. It's a bet I have made. That's what I'm looking at in the Rookie of the Year, defensive Rookie of the Year market.
I like that look. I mean, he's a big dude on that D line there. So, I might join you on there. 11-1 seems like good value. And, again, like Defensive Player of the Year, a couple small stretches can really turn the dynamic of this award. So Byron Murphy's a guy I will be keeping my eye on. And, Seattle is always going to be a threat to be a playoff team. And Mike McDonald's going to, he's going to be running a system that very well could have Seattle in the 9, maybe 10 win territory.
I'm all over Seattle this year. For whenever we start talking about those futures in our next episode, I'll just give you a little primer. I love the Seahawks this year.
All right. We got one last one here. It's changed a bit from years past, but the comeback player of the year, we got Rodgers and Burrow leading the charge here. So now, for those that don't know, the Geno Smith thing, where do you come back from? You come back from sucking. That's done away. The player that is now winning is coming back from either injury or illness. That's basically the new criteria, to really capture what the award is supposed to be about, like when Alex Smith came back and everybody argued, well, why didn't Damar Hamlin win? Well, Damar Hamlin had 2 snaps, not really, but he wasn't an impact player. I mean, the fact that he came back is miraculous, but then they try to run that Disney ass channel fake punt against Kansas City. But anyway, Eric, to be honest, I think this is a market I have no interest in getting in early. I'd like to see developing throughout the year, but if we're going on who's going to come back from injury or illness, if I'm going to take a stab somewhere, I probably would look for J.K. Dobbins at 30-1. This is a guy who's had to overcome a lot of adversity the last few years. I mean, he's missed almost his whole career with injuries. And now, even though Gus Edwards is his running mate with the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, we know, is going to be running the ball. And I think Dobbins is going to get worked back in. And listen, to be honest, I don't know if I see Dobbins being 1,000-yard back, but if Dobbins can be a guy that's got maybe 800 yards, 8 touchdowns, I don't think he would win off the stats. But I think the fact that he's been hurt 3 years in a row with major injuries could speak, just to his resiliency and coming back. But obviously the Rodgers-Burrow train off injuries is big. And I'd probably think if the Jets made the playoffs, it's going to be Rodgers to win.
Yeah, Jets win. I think those two, even Kirk Cousins, again, if the award, the way that it's worded now, it's specifically predicated on these guys coming back from major injuries. Nick Chubb just placed on the PUP list, so he's automatically missing 4 games. So you can, as much as I love Nick Chubb, who doesn't love Nick Chubb, not somebody I look at is going to have a 4-game deficit already. I totally understand your vibe on Dobbins. Burrow, of course, coming back from the injury. If he wins the situation where they win the AFC North and he's not good enough to win the MVP, they could definitely just give him this award, and vice versa to Aaron Rodgers, of course, coming off the Achilles. And again, though, I don't know how these voters with these new rules are gonna put the stock in, because Kirk, played obviously more games than Rodgers, Burrow, Richardson. But if Kirk Cousins really lights the league on fire, but those guys' stats are close enough, are they going to give it to the guy who, yes, he's coming off the torn Achilles, amazing thing, or are they going to give it to the guy who missed 17 games over the guy who missed 13 games with a little better stats? I just don't know. Too many awards, don't have to bet everything. I'm honestly not interested in this market.
Yeah, I mean, listen, here's the thing, and this is the most finicky award ever. This is truly subjective. There's very little objectivity in this award. And I think here with Joe Burrow, who already won the award, and how many games did he miss? He missed 5 games. He played 75% of the season, something like that. I don't think Burrow's really going to win. I think Rodgers, the fact that it might be his last year, a 2-1 makes sense, but I wouldn't bet that number just because I'm not 100% sure. Richardson at 750. I mean, he only played, I think, 12 games, maybe 13. But I don't think they're going to give it to Richardson. It's not some big, terrible comeback where he's come back from his shoulder. Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones is not going to win. Darnold is not going to win, because that is the Geno Smith just coming back from sucking. So people that bet Darnold a few weeks ago at a big number just because they thought that this is what the award was about. If the award is the criteria of what it's supposed to be now, then Darnold shouldn't win. Kyler Murray, I don't think is going to win. He missed half the season. Dobbins, I think, is appealing. Tank Dell, I don't. Deshaun Watson, I don't think the media is ever going to give him another award again. Herbert, same thing. Nick Bosa or Joey Bosa. I think it's probably going to be between Rodgers, and I think Dobbins, to me, would be the flyer as of now. But honestly, I don't think I'm going to place any money on this. I'm going to save it for the other awards and such.
Yeah, I have no interest in bidding COI this year.
Before we go, let's take a little preview into week 1.
Okay.
We have a few minutes here. I know we have a hard out at 6:00, but let's start off with your favorite game of the week, where you think you have the best advantage.
So week 1, nothing is locked and loaded yet for me, but I will be placing my official week 1 bets within the next probably 48 hours. Preseason's obviously over. Injury risks are now lower. Of course, timing the market and trying to get in on good numbers is the best way to do it. So looking at the odds screen right now, nothing is in play for me yet. But again, in the next 48 hours, I would definitely assume to have had some NFL action placed and locked and loaded. Call me a homer all you want. I like the Commanders +3 on the road. I think the Buccaneers defense is going to take a step back. I know obviously a rookie quarterback in his first game against the Todd Bowles, who is a good defensive coordinator, could be a tough situation, but I do think the Bucs overall are a team to fade this year. I had Baker Mayfield. I know he obviously had a really good season last year, all things considered. Losing his OC another time. Yes, the offensive line is good, but I'm not all in. I think Dan Quinn, the Washington Commanders defense was literally the worst defense in football last year in terms of just getting absolutely ran up and down the field on. they went out and added a lot of really solid overall players. Like, this is not going to be a 30-second defense. It's not going to be a number one defense, but it's not going to be the 30-second walk all over defense. So I think they can cover 3 points in Tampa Bay. And another game that I'm looking at, Falcons Steelers. I would love to take the Steelers +3 in the first week. I don't think the Falcons are a team that I think they will still end up winning the South, but they're just so unaligned organizationally. And yeah, it's disgusting. Russell Wilson is disgusting. Justin Fields disgusting. I don't care. I don't think the Atlanta Falcons are in a situation at any point this year where, like, even as a favorite, that they're a team they're like, yeah, I'm confident they're really going to win this football game. No, early looks for me are on 2 road dogs in Washington and Pittsburgh.
I think Pittsburgh is appealing. Week 1, getting a field goal. I think everybody's overhyping Atlanta, and somebody that grew up a Falcons fan for 2 decades, I know better than to buy the hype. I've seen it way too many times. I think Washington, that's a game I'm staying away from because I could see it could be a complete disaster for Washington. First game. I think Tampa's actually going to be a lot better. I think they're going to be the winners of the NFC South. I don't buy Atlanta. I think Tampa's there. But honestly, a game that I am very excited for. I can't tell if it's the game I'm most excited for. I love the Cardinals at +6.5 at the Buffalo Bills. I think Arizona, who I talked about last year as being like one of the most dangerous teams in the NFL, for the simple fact that when they decide to show up and they want to play football, they can beat anybody, anywhere, anytime. And we saw it at certain points during the season. Now, obviously, there's games where they just completely don't show up. That's why it's just you don't know who you're going to get. But I think here, week 1, for a Bills team that loses Stephon Diggs, that loses Jordan Poyer, that loses Trey White, the defense is not what it used to be. And their offense has to find a new identity. Laying 6.5 points to Arizona, the highest variance team in the NFL, it's just too much. I think the 6.5 is fair for Arizona to cover. I think they're live to win this game at +220. I am of the belief that the Cardinals will not be that bad this year. I do believe the Bills will regress. I think I could see them more along the lines of like a 9-win team, maybe 10 wins. Wild card, I don't think they win the East anymore. So Arizona is a team that I think we need to be looking out for because they're going to be exciting, especially if that Kyler Marv connection blows up early.
I don't see I see the hype for Arizona because like you mentioned, like when Kyler Murray was on last year, like they were winning games and covering spreads last season with Kyler Murray in the lineup, but I think that they're still a year away from actually being a good team. But again, week 1 is just so unique when everybody's had obviously ample time to prepare and game planning, et cetera, the hype, the emotion. So just in terms of line movement, I mean, these lines have been out forever, but it did open at 7 for Buffalo -7. Now it's already trickling to 6, 5.5. So as somebody who very much so appreciates a good line movement and monitors that daily, it seems as if currently from what's happening, the market is agreeing with where you're thinking at Arizona and Buffalo.
Yeah, I'm not that big on Buffalo this year, and I think it's just too big of a spread. Another one that I think I'm interested in real quick is the Jets. They were 5.5. They're down to 4.5. They're taking a lot of money. I think the Jets at San Francisco week 1 is another game where they're live to win. I probably think San Francisco is going to win, but I think the Jets can definitely cover the spread that's now down to 4.5 in some spots here on FanDuel, what I'm looking at right now. I think, Aaron Rodgers' first game back is going to be a little tricky. Maybe it's going to get him a couple drives to get himself together. I don't know what his mobility looks like when Nick Bosa is bearing down on him. But I know their defense is going to be able to hold in check the 49ers to a certain degree because, Ayuk is not available right now. Trent Williams, if those two guys, for whatever reason, miss week 1, I don't think they will, but they're not going to have had the practice time. So they're going to be vulnerable. And I think 4.5 is a big number. And I do think New York's got enough playmakers on offense to move the ball in this 49ers defense, Eric.
Yeah, no, I understand. Listen, I am not rooting for the Jets this season for only one reason. That's because I live in New York. My friends are a lot of my friends are Jet fans, and they're annoying as hell, and I just want to fade them to be annoying. But I obviously see that the team is a good overall team. I think Rob Saleh, that was one of the worst coaches in football and could be their downfall. But just simply because my friends are Jets fans, are some of the more irrational fans I know. I have no money fading them. I'm not actually like anti-Jets, but you know, I like to laugh at my friends if they do poorly. So let's go Niners.
This is Robert Saleh revenge game. What do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, listen. When it goes to Jets, again, don't want to. I know we got to hop real quick, but just saying, like, they're Super Bowl or bust team. So unless this team is playing in the Super Bowl or loses it to some nonsense in the AFC Championship game, honestly, this season is a failure, to be honest. And I guess we could discuss this coming up next unless you disagree, but they got to win it all.
I think they do as well. But thank you, everybody, so much for joining in. Happy to be back on Twitter streaming. Johnny V, stop being sheep. And you got the we got the subscription here. So don't forget to follow us on Twitter. I'm at _JohnnyVTV. Eric is at Slime Action. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you later on this week to discuss more NFL team futures. Have a good one.